Hi, everybody. It's Brett Bell here from Grassroots Online for episode 26 of our weekly video podcast, which we have creatively titled RootsCast. With me is my business partner and all-around decent fellow and decent individual, Mark Hardwick.
I'm a decent guy.
That's the best I could come up with right now. So
I know. It's pretty.
I just realized when I was looking at this video, I realized how much of my shirt I feel like this is a dad shirt. It's just like, maybe it's because it's Father's Day or whatever. I feel like this is like a dad shirt. I don't know.
Well, that's cool. You are a dad, so.
True. You don't have to look like one, socks and sandals and all that.
Yeah, so, are you saying you got socks and sandals on right now?
No, I don't, and I never will. What I wanted to do is I thought what we talked about it last week, and this week, this episode is going to be focusing specifically on the Ontario election. As you may or may not know, we just saw an election last Thursday, June 12th, and now the following week we decided to take a look at sort of what happened on the campaign trail and we'll talk a little bit about it. The one thing I want to say is, even if you're not from Ontario and you happen to be viewing this either in Canada or the United States, what we're focusing on is actually sort of lessons or thoughts that any digital campaign could take. So these are not necessarily Ontario specific. This is a specific example from Ontario that I think can apply to everywhere. So what I wanted to do is start off, and I think, Mark, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this, and I'll let you kick it off. I want to get your thoughts on your overall impression of the Ontario campaign from the digital side and sort of what you generally thought of the election as we watched over the last 5 to 6 weeks.
Well, I got to be honest with you, and not to sound too negative, because we are going to be positive and we're going to share some great thoughts here and some great strategy, but boring.
Yeah. Boring.
I gotta tell you, I didn't see a lot of engagement from any side. I didn't see the type of strategy I thought I would see in 2014. And to be fair, I mean, it was a snap election, but parties did know this was coming, right? We've been in a minority government for 2 years, so parties did know this was coming. So I'm very surprised that I didn't see some of the things I would have liked to see, and we'll talk about those things later in this episode. But it seemed like it was more of a, as you put it, and as many others have put it, is a broadcast election, right? Not a lot of engagement, a lot of communication online, and it was just all around boring.
Yeah, I think I wrote a post about it last week, talking about how I felt that just really on all sides there were some missed opportunities, and part of what I meant by that, and I think you share the general view, is that there's no question that this is what, as you call it, and I have called it, sort of the broadcast election. And what we mean by that, I think, is that really it was really focused on sort of very large-scale broadcast about advertising and messaging, where there was not a whole heck of a lot of targeting. It was really more about sort of getting the message out through more traditional means. Sort of, it was on the digital side, it was sort of an extension of the TV and radio ad buys, where essentially they just had online versions of them. There wasn't a lot of engagement at all. I think looking at all three parties, I didn't see any real direct voter engagement at all, whether it's everything from Twitter chats to Reddit Ask Me Anythings to Google Hangouts to responding on Twitter. I mean, like, it just goes run the gambit. There really was in broadcast mode, very very compartmentalized, very sort of preaching to the public. There was no real engagement, and like you, Mark, I think that this. In 2014, we seem to be the digital side of the campaign here in Ontario, but also in Canada. I've talked about this before in BC and Alberta, but there seems to be a real disconnect between what people strive to do and in the digital side and what we've seen. Like, this is a good example. This is evidence where ultimately it was just about really running ads and posting talking points, either visually or otherwise. So. Really, I mean, I'm almost trying to think of anything creative that came out of it. I can't really think of too many examples. So it's unfortunate. It really was. So rather than complain, I think what we wanted to talk about is how, where do you think this needs to go? I think that both you and I are in consensus that this is just something that ultimately there really wasn't a lot to it, and I don't want to belabor that point because I think it's important for us to talk about where we should be moving rather than the state of affairs at the moment. So I'm just trying to think in first terms, like, is there anything off the top of your head that you would like to see, Mark, that you ultimately found lacking in this campaign?
So here's something that I think that is very, very simple, and that would really help with the first step of social media engagement. Okay, and not even at a riding level, because I know it'd be tough, but at a campaign level and at a provincial party level.
Yep.
I would like to see, and I tried this, but it was really tough at a riding level to do it as one person because I wasn't involved in a central campaign. But it's tough to do at a riding level. But at a central campaign, I'd like to see one person, or maybe two, depending on resources, focus on social media and engaging with folks on social media, right? So that at least folks are getting answers to their questions,
Right.
And I'm not talking about responding to trolls, but I'm talking about legitimate questions that people have. So there's some type of engagement going on those Facebook pages other than just posts being happened. So people are getting answers to their question about policy, right? Or they're being directed into the right questions. Because I watched a lot of people on Facebook, even the local ridings, saying, well, where's this information? This isn't, or well, they're doing this. Well, no, actually they're not. Like, they're not actually doing this. Or another party is, well, we're doing this, but how could we improve it, right? So have someone who's the basics. This is going back to basics. Have someone who's on Facebook, Twitter, that's having the conversation with the people, because they're there to have those conversations. So let's put someone there who's responding to them. So that's number one. That's basics for social media for me.
Yeah. I think that's good. I mean, the challenge that the parties always have is actually having the people power to be able to actually do that. I was looking at some of the Facebook pages, either Kathleen Wynne or Andrea Horwath or Tim Hudak, and in some cases the posts have over 900 comments, right? And of course not all of them deserve to be responded to, but I think that's a really great idea. It's just a question of getting the people lined up to actually be able to do it, and people who are authorized to actually speak on behalf of the party and behalf of the candidate, right? That's always the challenge, is making sure that they're actually able to do that and able to speak, sort of have the authority to be able to speak. That's always, and that's a tough thing for campaigns to do, for them to let go of that responsibility and allow somebody to just sort of think on their feet and be able to do it. I'd like to see more of that. I agree with you, but I've always found there's a lot of resistance to that. There's no question.
Yeah, I know, and this is the resistance again, where we've talked about this before, and this is about building your team.
Yeah,
this is about building a team of people you trust, and it doesn't come overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. So all the campaign teams need to start rebuilding again. Like, this is politics. Just because it's a 4-year majority government, that doesn't mean that the Wynne government stops their strategy. That doesn't mean that Andrew Horwath stops their strategy, and that doesn't mean that whoever the Ontario PCs will have as leader and as a party, that doesn't mean they stop. This is an ongoing thing. This isn't a one-time campaign that ends at the end of this campaign. This is on and on and on. So you need to build that team. And end of story. You got to find the people you trust, and you got to put those people in the positions of authority and trust them. They're not going to muck things up for you. And I did say muck with an M.
Yeah, no, this is a PG podcast. But and I think probably where I would have seen that happening, probably the most, at least from a public example, is the NDP campaign with Andrea Horwath's website launch. So just looking at it here, there's a fair amount of fanfare talking about their this, basically using Nation Builder, and there was an opportunity to get involved and all that kind of stuff. So you click on it here, get involved and what have you. But the interesting thing that I found about all this kind of stuff, well, there's two things I want to say. The first one is to your point, but then I'll reach out to a second point, which I saw with all of the other candidates, is that one of the things that I saw was that they rolled out this join, volunteer, all that kind of stuff, basically on the eve of the election, right? And what, to your point, building that community and building those people who are going to speak on your behalf, I think is something that has to happen long, like years and years and years beforehand, right? Because to build an army. I did a post on this. I feel like I'm just regurgitating some of my blog posts, but I did a post about how armies aren't like they're built, right? They don't just appear. I said armies are recruited, right? You got to go out and find those people who are willing to speak on your behalf and who are willing to play a part in your online space. But the second point that I want to make, and I don't know if we're moving on to a new topic, but the second thing I want to make, which I thought was really important, is when I was looking at all of the ways to get involved. So if you look at, and I'm going to go back to this again, and I'm going to screen it again. So if you go back and you look at this is an example. So Andrea Horwath, but I think the NDP was fairly, fairly. This is sort of what we saw for all of, like a fairly typical example of what we saw for all the candidates. Look at what they're asking you to do. So they're saying, okay, you're on the digital side. They're saying get involved, take a lawn sign, donate, or volunteer. Okay, fair enough. And that's great, and we need those kind of stuff. But is that all of the things that we can ask people to do? Especially in the online space, the long and the short of it is this: all the parties know, and I know this for a fact. All the parties know that less and less people are taking the time to go out to a campaign office. However, we still are taking the time. What are the main things we're asking people to do? They're asking them, like a volunteer. They want them to go into a campaign office. And you say, you know what? There has to be more options for people online to be able to get involved on their own. And we saw that again. We don't like to talk about the Barack Obama, campaign, but that and others, they built the tools to be able to allow volunteers and others to be able to actually go out there and take action and do things on their own without having to come to the central campaign. And I don't know when campaigns are going to figure this out. I mean, they're all worried about their databases and all that kind of stuff. And you say, you know what, guys, if the only way that you can contact people is by getting them to come and volunteer, I don't know what you're waiting for, the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers to show up at your campaign. You're going to be waiting a really long time. And we have to use digital technology. We have to use technology to be able to buttress that infrastructure, to be able to get people to be able to take more actions and to be able to be more involved than we currently see. They're not going to come down the campaign office. Okay, so let's equip them with the proper tools to do what they need to do.
Yeah, basically like sending people out on a mobile canvas without even having to come to the campaign office. Like I live in a fairly, I live in Welland. It's fairly it's fairly dense population, right? But I was on, let's just say for example, on E-Day, I was out in Niagara Falls riding, okay, and I was out in an area that had very very sparse. It was
farms.
It was farms. It was farms, basically, right?
Okay.
So let's say that I want to help out. Let's say that I want to help out my local campaign team, right? But I don't want to go into Niagara Falls, which is half an hour away, to go grab a list. I don't want to do that, right? So here's an idea that I have: an app that basically gives you the idea, the possibility of going out into your local area. And finding supporters, right? You find the supporters with the app, and then what happens is you can actually send them a message, that generic message, whether it be about an energy issue, whether it be about an education issue, whether it be a generic issue, whether it be pointing to them to the latest and greatest Facebook app that you've developed that engages voters about your policy and procedure, engages them to share with people. You can send them that information after you've marked off that they're a supporter. You leave their doorstep, you have their email information, you have their contact information, the way they like to be contacted, and you send them that message off as you're leaving, right? So now you've added another person, and you've directly hit them soon as you left. There's no way they can be missed because you're doing it soon as you leave. They're getting that message, and they're like, whoa, they have it together. They're getting me as soon as they leave my door.
Yep. Yeah, and I think no, there's absolutely no question. I think that will give them an opportunity and that will empower them. But you have to build, like to your point, you have to build that technology. That's not something you do overnight. That's not something you do 3 months before an election unless you want to pay through the nose. That's a plan that you have to roll out and think about. Like now, we have 4 years until next election. This is when you start figuring out that digital infrastructure and start to, it just hit my lamp. When you have to start figuring out about whether or not that that having those plans in place that you actually want to execute on. It's not something that you can do tomorrow or next week.
there's prefabricated tools for this, right? I looked into some tools, and I'm going to give them a plug right in here, so we'll have to do a Twitter shout out when I do it. But I looked at a campaign tool, a mobile campaigning tool, Organizer, right? So you can geo map everything for where you want your campaign team to go. They don't have to come to their office. They turn on their app, and they have exactly where they're going with exactly the people. They can enter the information. It's right there. So Organizer already has that mobile canvassing tool built. So it's not even like they need to go out and do it. They just need to use it or build their own, whatever they want to do. But it's there already, and it's simple and it's easy for people to use. And that's the thing with volunteering, right? I think that campaign teams need to figure out how it's easier for people to do things for them, because they'd be more willing to do it if it takes up less of their time. They'd be more willing to do it, because when you have to drive 20 minutes to your local campaign office, 20 minutes home, 20 minutes to where you're canvassing, that's already an hour out of your day. Whereas if you're in your local neighborhood already, you can just grab your phone, walk around your neighborhood, you come back, you're done in two hours, you've saved an hour already. I'm done. So that's my one thing on canvassing, right?
Okay. So the next one, I'll guess I'll speak to it, is, and this is something I'll give, Mark, I think you raised. One thing that I'll show here is that a lot of the traffic, so we know that this campaign was a real ad-focused campaign. I mean, really, from what I can tell, all of the money that was spent on all three campaigns, the vast majority of the money went to online advertising, which is unfortunate. It's great that they're looking at online advertising as a viable way to advertise to voters, but it's also kind of disappointing, because I think that's where a lot of the money was spent. We actually don't have real figures, but just looking at the frequency of the ads and all that kind of stuff, that clearly there was some money behind it. I think that the Ontario PC campaign said in one article that they were going to be purchasing the largest online ad buy in the history of Ontario, or I guess political history of Ontario. So obviously there was money behind it. But one of the things that I noticed in driving these, and I'll share this, driving the views for things like the YouTube page, like here, this is the and I'm going to mute it because it doesn't matter, that the sound doesn't matter, but ultimately, so this is the end of the Ontario PC campaign, and you see here it says get the plan. And that's great, and there's 74,000 views. We have a very similar situation with the Liberal campaign, where see here it has 104,000 views. But if you look at both the ends of the campaigns, of both the email, and I'm at the end of both of the ads, there's no overlay. There's no opportunity for somebody to click on that overlay and to take action, either through signing up or donating or anything like that. And that's a huge lost opportunity. And I know Mark, you mentioned it when in our pre-conversation beforehand, but if I can think of one glaring opportunity, glaring sort of thing we're missing here on this, it's the fact that they don't have any of these calls to actions, which are very similar, very easy overlays that you can have both on any of these channels. And I think that that's something that they could have easily had people take action, and I'm really not sure why they didn't do that.
Yeah, no, I didn't even notice it till today when I was looking at things, and I noticed that there's 75,000 in the top viewing for the Ontario PCs, 105 for the Liberals, and 91,000 for the NDP top viewing videos. So if you take those numbers and even 10%, 20% of those were actually to take action. That's some pretty big numbers, right? And that multiplies when those people take action offline, right? Yeah, that's the most important part, is when they take the action offline. So, I think that was a huge missed opportunity. I was really surprised that they didn't use that to convert people to go do something for them, because clearly people were willing to watch those videos. So I think that's something that all parties need to look at to convert people to do things for them and make them take action. Right. I definitely think that, as we've said, this has been a missed opportunity digitally. And one of the basic things that I came in, and unfortunately I didn't, and I'll give the reason I didn't have any kind of emails coming from me from the Liberal Party. One reason was because I was in an NDP riding and I wasn't really concerned with what the Liberals were doing. That being said, the emails to me were very not inspiring and didn't make me want to do anything. For example, in an email, it had a link for me to do something. Well, that's great, but I want something that's going to make me. I usually skim through emails really quickly, and so there was nothing to make me skim and click very quickly on that. It was just a link. I did see a couple NDP emails as we got through to the later days that had nice big buttons explaining that they wanted me to volunteer or explaining that they wanted to donate, and it actually made me want to click on their button. Now, I would never click on that button because, I don't want to donate to them. But if I was a member or if I was a voter thinking who hadn't made up their mind already, I would probably click on that button and I would make that $10 donation, or I would go check out what they wanted me to do. So I think it's really important that we think about our email strategies, and we're not there yet. And this is a very simple, basic thing that we need to be there, and that we need to have a call to action that's very clickable, very quick to get people's attention.
Yeah, I found a number of emails, that I was signed up to all three parties, so I was following all three of them, and some of them I was segmenting. I'd actually signed up to different lists for different things. And the one thing I'll say is that in many examples, I got the same email regardless of which list I signed up for. So I used a different email address for every list, and I found that I was getting the same email for the same. Like, I was basically just getting one version of the email. So we all know that for being able to segment and micro-target your campaign based on, if somebody's interested, if somebody's concerned about hydro, that's a different email than somebody who's concerned, say, about deficit and debt issues. So I think that that's something that we really, I think, could improve upon. I think that I'd like to see a lot more segmentation of emails, because you got to be talking to the audience. You have to be narrowcasting and focusing on what issues they're concerned about, rather than just sort of a general, hey, we hope you change, we need help, donate here, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing I'll say about emails as well, I appreciate the fact that some people read these emails cover to cover. I did find that a lot of times the emails went through 3 paragraphs before you actually hit a link. I think that they're testing them. They should be testing all of them to see what gets the best clicks and what gets the best results. I doubt they're doing that. On some of the evidence that I saw, there was no segmentation. There was only one big global list. Which is not, again, I don't think that's best practices in terms of emails that are going out. But that being said, I would doubt that these huge, long, 3 or 4 paragraphs worth of text before you get to an actual click is the best way to go about it. And I'd like to see a little less of that. I think that people need to get to the point. And I agree with you. I like the NDPs. They had big, huge buttons. I think the Liberals did too. I'm just trying to recall some of their emails, but I think they had fairly large click to call buttons as well. I don't know if that necessarily does anything. I remember reading some information from the U.S. where actually yellow highlighted links worked better as opposed to buttons. So I think it all depends on your list. It depends on who you're going after. But I think that stuff should have been tested, and I saw no real evidence that they were trying out different things. But I'm hoping that's not the case, but I think that might actually be the case.
Yeah.
So I guess go ahead.
No, I don't disagree with you on that, and so I'm not an email marketing strategist, but what I saw from a user point of view and a voter didn't pull me in. So just my suggestions of what pulled me in, right?
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is one thing I really would like to see I'd like to get, not to belabor the point too much on the email, but one thing I also noticed is that I saw a lot of emails coming from people who were not what I would call household names. So they're either campaign people or things like that. And I always wonder, I'd love to know about the open rates on those, because you're kind of thinking of it like, you're trying to get people to open your email, and obviously if it comes from the leaders, that's one thing and what have you. But I also wonder if it actually, like some of them I saw, they were pretty obscure. It's from the media person or the fundraising chair or even the campaign manager or whatever. I said, well, unless they're really well known, or even some cases like a councillor, an MP, or whatever. I mean, again, unless they're really well known or it's specific to your region, I'm wondering why they would do that. And I'm hoping, again, that they were segmenting and testing, but I would probably guess, and I've seen some research that actually backs this up, that your spokespeople, the people that you choose to sort of to send out this stuff on your behalf, have to be really well known for it to actually have any impact. So I'm wondering why they would do that. But that again, that's something that I'd like to see. Again, if you're going to put special guests on your email, use people who are very well known and people who have a really high profile. Otherwise, I think that you're not going to be creating a positive impact on your open rates.
Yeah, true enough. Do you know one thing that did kind of from a voter point of view? When I opened some emails from specific parties, they weren't really specific or segmented to the party. So, for example, I live in Welland. So when I open an email that says we need to beat a specific party, let's say we need to beat the Liberals, but I live in a riding that's been NDP for 35 years, 36 years. So we don't need to beat the Liberals in this riding. They're not our opponent in this riding.
No,
our opponent is the NDP. So those emails don't do anything for me. So yeah, okay, we need to beat the Liberals. Great. I know it's a general Ontario theme, but why not send an email out per riding? Like you know where I live, you have my information, you have my postal code because my postal code's been collected. Right? Otherwise, why is my postal code being collected, right? Yeah. So it needs to be segmented by specific area. And I understand there's only 20 NDP seats, and it's not a big deal or whatever. But I think that sending it to a voter who may not even know that we need to beat the Liberals or we need to beat the NDP is not really any use to them.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. And I think that's something that could be easily segmented. Yep. I guess the last point that I want to make, and I think that you had some points on this as well, but I want to make a different point. Last point I want to make is in terms of the signups. I think a lot of both from Facebook, Twitter, all those on the websites, essentially it was sort of like a lot of how you got people to sign up, and I don't have a problem with it. And although the one thing I'll mention is that when people are signing up, one of the things they said and I saw this with the Liberals. It's actually interesting because it's almost the exact same strategy. The Liberals and the PCs, Liberal less with the NDP. But what they said was they signed this petition to tell, to stop whomever or to start this from whatever cause. They sort of like sign this petition. So they'd ask for your first name, last name, email, and in many cases a postal code. And the thing that I didn't like about that, which is, there's two things. One is I actually think that's fairly disingenuous, and I just say this as I think it's sketchy, right? There's no petition. You're not signing. And where does that petition, like that list? It doesn't go anywhere. It's not forwarded to the legislature or anything like that. So I think it's kind of disingenuous, and I'm not a huge fan of doing that because I think that what ends up happening is once you start getting emails from an organization after you said sign this petition, I think that's I don't know if that's the best way to create your email. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to give people a reason to enter an email. You can't say sign up for updates. Nobody's going to do that. But I think we can find a better way to do that. I think that if we say essentially that you're either a couple things. One is we either give them an action to do. To your point, I think giving them an action, getting them to take a little bit of action, but also once they sign up for email, I think you got to make that fairly clear that they're joining a team, that they're joining an organization, all that kind of stuff. The second part, well, I guess I'll let you speak to sort of where things went after you actually signed up. I think that was something else that you had a few questions on, right? Once somebody actually signed this, gave their first name, last name, and email, where it actually went to.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where the actual emails would go to from different from different parties, because when I signed up for the different party lists, I seem to be getting the same email. I think towards the end, I received a paragraph or two difference in my emails, but there was no real like segmentation on those. So, and I'm wondering though, like, so. Are those after I sign up for a specific issue, yep. will I ever receive an email again? Because really, when I go to put my name to a petition, that's great. I put my name to that petition. That doesn't mean that I want to continually receive emails in regards to other things from parties. So does that mean once I put my information to a petition or whatever the specific issue is, that I'll never receive those emails to any other thing, or do I get grouped into one big batch now? That would be my question. I mean, yeah. I know I can unsubscribe, but I'd rather just receive emails about education, for example, as opposed to being bashed into an overall kind of email group now.
Yeah, or worse, a donors list, right?
Correct. Right.
Yeah, because that's a big assumption that people are making there. So So there you go. So I want to kind of wrap this up because we're getting a little long on time. So I just want to give you the opportunity, Mark. Is there anything else, any other pieces of advice that you give to the parties in terms of where they go from here? Is there any other final thoughts that you had in the election? Because I think that we've kind of beaten this beaten this dead horse. I think we both agree that it's not exactly awe-inspiring in terms of what we saw there. But I just want to get to see if you had any other suggestions in terms of your final thoughts on the campaign itself.
Well, I think we did a good job, and we gave some good ideas on both. I mean, I know it's tough. It's tough. I've been there, so I know it's tough. But here's my last thought. Okay, and this is the folks who think digital doesn't matter, because this is the thing that they'll say. Well, you're saying the digital wasn't really good, but they went off and they won a majority. Okay, fine. You're right. They won a majority. That's the way it was, and there was no big digital splash, kaboom, whatever. I think it was a lot different this time around. But let me put this thought on paper. So people who are 14 now couldn't vote, but they're growing up on social media. They're going to be 18 next. Okay, so 18-year-olds don't vote. Okay, well, the 18-year-old is going to be 22. They may vote, and they've grown up on social media too. Okay, you don't think a 22-year-old? Well, the 24-year-old this time around who's on social media and who is now 28, married with a family, has kids, and his career or her career, has grown up on social media too, and that's where they're going to get their information from in 4 years. So that's why we need to target them on digital, and that's why we need to do digital, because those people and the people that are in their early 30s, that's where they're getting their information from now, and that's how they're going to make their decisions. They're not even going to probably be watching a lot of TV and a lot of TV ads from now. They're not going to be, engaged. They have their conversations on Twitter. They have them on Facebook, and they make decisions that way. So that's my say to, digital doesn't matter. It does matter. The folks that are growing up are going to be the ones that are voting. The folks, and not to sound harsh, but the folks that are voting for us now, they may not be around in 4 years. They're, people are getting older in age. Things happen. So we need to be and hang out where people are hanging out now.
Yeah, and there's no question that Canadians are some of the most engaged, citizens in the world. And studies show that 40% of people who are on the internet actually talk about politics or current affairs on their social networks, or they see it on their newsfeed. So that kind of conversation, that's where the news is being consumed, that's where it's being talked about, all that kind of stuff. The one thing I'd say is this is my last point, which is it's a bit of a rant, but I'm going to keep it tight because I know we're tight on time. There's a distinct disconnect between the people who are making the decisions and sort of what the reality is on the digital side. And I know that it gets very short shrift, okay? Because I talk to people, I've talked to people both on the provincial campaign, but I also talk to people on local campaigns, municipal, all that kind of stuff, federal, talk to a whole bunch of people, and I can tell you that digital continues to be an afterthought. And part of the reason is because whenever we have an opportunity to actually make some strides and really sort of create that digital infrastructure like we had here in the Ontario campaign, we don't do it. We take the easy path. The easy path is ads. I don't have a problem with ads. Ads are a really great way to drive traffic. But the question that you have to ask is, once you drive that traffic, then what do you do? And it has to be more than just donating money and signing up for an email list. It has to be more than that. And I can guarantee you that if the infrastructure is created, people will do that. I've seen some examples of that, both with the Liberals and the NDP, where they built, I think the Liberals built Fred, which is sort of a social network. I know the PCs in the past have had a lot of, and we were, full disclosure, we were involved in that, where we were building sort of like, activities and the infrastructure for people to take action online and things like that. But it has to be something that's a regular part of the infrastructure in the parties. And look. 2 of the 3 parties are going to have a heck of a lot of time raising money right now over the next 4 years. They're broke, right? Both the PCs and the NDP are broke. You are not going to find a better way to get in touch with people, and you're not going to find a better way to communicate and interact and engage with voters than social media. And you keep, the parties continue to waste that opportunity that they have to build on the infrastructure, to build these systems in place where this can actually happen. And I don't know when that's eventually going to stop. And, well, I guess to answer my own question, it's going to stop when the decision makers, whoever they may be, the decision makers actually start making this a priority. The one lesson that I got from the Barack Obama campaign, and I can, people continue to look at it from face value, but when you actually look at the Barack Obama campaign, right from it had its origins with the Dean campaign back in, I think, 2002. And what they did was they made digital priority, and they said digital is going to be the way that we can organize and mobilize people right from the beginning. And that was the difference, because they had created the systems. So by 2008, they had a lot of fantastic systems in place for them to capitalize on the support of the candidate. And if we continue to not do that, and we continue to not learn these lessons, we're going to see the same thing over and over and over and over again. So that's basically my very quick rant, but that's my sort of final thoughts on the Ontario election.
Well put, buddy. I think we should end it there because that was well put.
That's all right. Well, we will end it there. Thanks very much for watching. Please leave any comments or your thoughts on the Ontario election, either here on the video page or on our Facebook page. And next week we will get back to talking about the intersection between digital media and politics, and we'll bring you some interesting stories. So take care and have yourself a great week.
Have a good afternoon, folks.